Okay, hello everyone. I'm Gail Koza. I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the American Cetacean Society, San Francisco Bay Chapter, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to our monthly speaker series. Founded in 1967, the American Cetacean Society is the oldest whale conservation nonprofit on the planet. We protect and conserve whales, dolphins, and porpoises and their habitats through public education, research grants, and conservation actions. And as part of our education programs, we offer this monthly speaker series, which features experts from around the world who bring you the most up-to-date information available about whales, dolphins, porpoises, the marine and riverine ecosystems they inhabit, and more. This series features renowned scientists, conservationists, authors, photographers, filmmakers, and students who all share a common interest in conserving and protecting cetaceans and their habitats. And this event, like all of our programs, are wholly funded by individual donations from our community. If you'd like to support our programs, please visit our website at acs-sfbay.org. And we're very grateful for your support. Now, tonight, I am delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Kathi George. She's Director of Field Operations and Response at the Marine Mammal Center. Kathi will be discussing human impacts on large whales. She'll provide to us a deeper look at the center's whale response efforts as a leading first responder to whales in distress. We will learn tonight about how whales are affected by human impacts, changing ocean conditions, and what the Marine Mammal Center and other partners are doing to address and prevent these threats. A little more about Kathi. After more than a decade of volunteering, Kathi George officially joined the Marine Mammal Center in 2019, and she has expanded efforts to advance whale entanglement, response, and prevention. As a Level 3 co-investigator on NOAA's Marine Mammal Health and Stranding Response Programs permit, Kathi is permitted to respond to entangled whales. She has participated in 6 whale disentanglements, numerous entangled whale responses, and over 50 sea lion disentanglements. She also leads advocacy efforts to reduce risk of whale entanglement. Previously, Kathi co-founded California Whale Rescue, a nonprofit dedicated to entangled whale response and prevention. The organization supported NOAA's fisheries efforts to standardize response practices, gear, training, and communications. Kathi received her bachelor's degree from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. She is in the conservation seat for the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council and a member of the California Dungeness Crab Fishing Gear Working Group. Kathi is leading a project with the working group to deploy solar loggers on commercial fishing and whale watching boats to inform relative risk of entanglement. Kathi spends as much time as she can underwater and on boats, in addition to enjoying California's coasts and mountains with her husband and her son. Welcome, Kathi. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you so much, Gail, for that introduction, and thank you to the San Francisco Bay chapter of the American Cetacean Society for having me today. And thank you to everyone for joining. I'm really excited to share some of the work that I'm most passionate about. And being a true scientist, I am out in the field right now, so I apologize in advance for any background noise, but as we know, we sometimes often have to move around during the day. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start my presentation, and I welcome everyone's questions, thoughts, and input. So thank you.
Actually, while you're getting started there, I should mention we will take questions for Kathi at the end of her presentation. So please feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A during the presentation, and then we will read them out to her out loud at the end so that she can answer them. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm gonna Okay, I am here today to talk to you about human impacts on large whales. I first want to start with the Marine Mammal Center, the organization that I work for. Our mission is to advance global ocean conservation through marine mammal rescue and rehabilitation, scientific research, and education. The Marine Mammal Center is the largest marine mammal teaching hospital in the world. I manage the field operations and response program that looks at our 600 miles of California coastline, and we rescue sick and injured marine mammals on the beach. We rescue entangled animals on the shoreline and in hard to reach places like jetties, and also in open water. My team also manages field offices in Morro Bay, California and Moss Landing, California. And we have a dedicated field research team looking at cetaceans in the bay and beyond. And we're really excited about the prevention piece. We're a critical responder to the threats that marine mammals are facing in the ocean. I'm going to talk to you today about 3 of the largest impacts that humans are having on large whales. And that's not where our work stops. We really want to follow through and take action to protect our shared ocean environment for future generations and really mitigate the issues that we have control over. One of the first topics that I want to talk about are vessel strikes. This is an area that the center is working on from ecology to pathology. We have dedicated field researchers. I want to make a little note to Izzy Shaponiak, who sadly passed away last year, but was an important member of our team. And we're out there in the bay. This photo was taken in San Francisco Bay and offshore looking for whales. And we're not only looking for the whales, we're also sharing that information with the US Coast Guard so they can share that information and provide a local notice to mariners or be on the lookout for industry to be aware of any whales that are in the proximity to shipping lanes or shipping traffic. And vessel strikes are one of the top 3 causes of death for large whales. And they're often cryptic. When a whale is hit by a vessel, it oftentimes sinks. And as Cotton shared in his previous ACS talk, there are approximately 80 deaths of whales per year that are due to vessel strikes. The best thing that we could do for vessel strikes is to slow ships down and reduce that lethal impact of a ship strike. This graphic that you see here is the thesis by a master's student at San Francisco State University, Becca Lane. She is also the program coordinator for my team at the Marine Mammal Center, and she's looking at understanding risk of ship strike in San Francisco Bay and on the approach to San Francisco. So what you see here in this graph that we're looking at, here is the Golden Gate Bridge, San Francisco, and on the Marin side. And the black markers that you see are whales that were photo ID'd in 2017. So one really exciting thing is we're seeing a lot of whales come into the bay, but that's also a not so great thing because there's a lot of traffic in the bay of vessels of all sizes. And what you see here are the AIS tracks, or the automatic identification system of vessels of approaching and going into bay. And you can see that this pink is category here. This is the passenger vessels. These are coming kind of straight into the bay and going on. The freight ones are coming in on the purple tracks, and the tankers are the red tracks. So what we're seeing is that because this is such a geographically small area, anytime a whale comes into this area, it is at risk for potential strike. And that's why we want to do what we can to prevent it in the first place. And I'm a member of the Harbor Safety Committee, and I know that the team there is also looking at this particular issue, and no one wants to hit a whale or kill a whale. And there are groups and dedicated individuals that are really looking at reducing this from happening in the first place. One other thing, I'm going to jump back to, I don't have a good image for that. I'll just share it right here. There was a working group from the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary and Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuaries Advisory Council that was convened and looked at ways they could reduce ship strike by 50% in the Greater Farallones Sanctuary and Cordell Bank National Marine Sanctuaries. And the team looked at multiple options, and one of the recommendations that was shared was having instead of just the shipping lanes, have the entire sanctuary contain that voluntary vessel speed reduction. And this recommendation was supported by everyone. And I saw the poster come out for the upcoming VSR season, and I'm really excited to share that the recommended voluntary VSR zone for the Cordell Bank and Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary is all encompassing of this voluntary 10 knot speed limit. So really hoping that this can reduce the issue as we move forward. We also do this on the pathology side. So when a whale does strand in the Bay Area, we work with our partners at the California Academy of Sciences to go out and conduct a necropsy or animal autopsy on every animal that dies. So this is a photo of a gray whale on Ocean Beach from last year. Sadly, it did die of a ship strike, but we really want to understand what's happening out there so we can use that information to inform risk reduction. And the photo on the right is a marine mammal monitor radar station that helps Becca with her thesis and is available, and the Anthropocene Institute is using that data to understand ship speeds of all vessel sizes that are coming into San Francisco Bay. And I'm going to jump over to malnutrition now. I know I'm going through vessel strike pretty quickly, and I'm going to go through malnutrition pretty quickly because I really want to focus on the entanglement piece. That is my area of expertise and a topic that I am really passionate about. But another leading cause of death for large whales is malnutrition. And there are a couple different things that we've observed that are contributing to this. The two photos on the right are gray whales in San Francisco Bay, and the photo on the top right is a very skinny gray whale. We've been observing gray whales coming into the bay on their northern migration from their feeding grounds in Mexico as they head up to the Arctic. We think that they're using the bay as a resting ground on their migration, and they're even trying to feed. There was one observation of a gray whale trying to feed in San Francisco Bay, which was a unique thing to see. And they've been spending longer periods of time. The gray whale in the bottom photo was observed for several weeks hanging out in the bay. And we're able to have this information due to our field research team and our great network of citizen scientists that help share information with the team. And there has been a gray whale unusual mortality event, or UME, that's been going on for the last 4 years. The waters up in the Arctic are warming. This is throwing off the entire ecosystem, and the prey of the gray whales isn't as abundant as it once was and isn't as nutritious due to the warming water, melting ice, and contributing factors. So we're seeing whales that are kind of heading south on their migration, skinnier than they should be. And then while they're in Mexico, they've traveled the longest distance of marine mammals. They're breeding, they're potentially mating and giving birth and heading on that long migration back north. So we've been observing a lot of really skinny gray whales. And the Marine Mammal Center is part of a working group that is working on understanding what's happening with these gray whales and what we can do in the future. They've lost about 6,000 animals in the population. It's around 20,000 right now over the last several years. And while the numbers for the UME are going down overall along the entire West Coast, we are seeing an increase in the Bay Area. Last year, we had 15 gray whale strandings. Another issue that is linked to malnutrition are the marine heat waves that we're seeing off our coast. And the photo on the left is showing some of those heat waves, with really 2015, 2016 being the peak of that heat wave. I think there was another one in 2019. But what we're seeing when these heat waves come in is that the small bait fish and prey are either moving to colder waters or coming inshore, and we call that habitat compression. And when the fish come inshore, that's also where a lot of human activity is. So it's increasing the risk of something happening between humans and whales. 2015, 2016 also happened to be the peak of entanglements out here on the West Coast. The heat wave came in, it caused a toxin called domoic acid to form off of our coast in high numbers. It ultimately delayed the crab season. The fishing season is supposed to open in the middle of November. In 2015, it was delayed until April of the following year due to domoic acid toxicity in the crabs that were to be caught. April happens to also coincide with large whales returning from their breeding grounds. So we had this perfect storm of prey not being available, and the whales returning, as well as the fishermen fishing pretty heavily. So we had, unfortunately, a record number of entanglements during this time period. This is something that I'll touch on in a later slide, but really those ocean conditions, the marine mammals that we see off our coast, they're here for the food. That's what they're coming for. And when the food is in areas of high human activity, that's when the risk increases. And that's what we're seeing happen right now off of our coast. So here is my introduction to large whale entanglement. This is another top threat for large whales. You can see in this photo, this is a humpback whale. All of our disentanglement work is done from small boats. We never get into the water, and it's all done with NOAA permission. And what an entanglement looks like above the water, with perhaps a line visible over the whale's back, is not what's happening under the water. In this particular scenario, we see quite a few wraps around this humpback whale's pec fin and around the tail. So it's really important to understand what the entanglement is before we go and make any cuts. We may only have 1 or 2 chances to free this animal from the entanglement, and we want to make sure that we make those cuts in the right place without causing further injury or constricting any entanglement any closer to the animal's body. And why do we do entanglement response? We do it for multiple reasons. We do it for the welfare of an individual whale. Entanglement can cause suffering to the whale. A whale, while it can carry gear for a long period of time, it will ultimately impact the whale with the drag from the entanglement, and even just a line on the whale's body could cause an injury. So to prevent any unnecessary suffering or death of a whale is why we want to save that particular whale. But it's also about conservation of a whale population. If we look at endangered species, especially the critically endangered right whale on the East Coast, the disentanglement effort of a breeding female is known to have positive impacts to that population size. I believe it's about 8% of the right whale population that is alive today because disentanglements happened with breeding females. So it has a direct impact on the population. And the graphic that you see on the right it's a humpback whale you see on the left. The image on the right are the different populations of humpback whales, and each population of a humpback whale has a different status. The humpback whales that we see in California come from Mexico and Central America, and in Mexico they're threatened, and in Central America they're endangered. And there's no easy way to tell which population we're looking at based on looking at the whale. We either need to match it with photo ID to see if it's been seen in the breeding grounds as well as the feeding grounds here in California, or genetics. So I want to mention something about the Entanglement Response Network. This is a network that is overseen by NOAA. It's part of the Marine Mammal Health and Stranding Response Program. It's operated under permit 18786-06, and around the country, we use the same tools and same techniques to disentangle whales. And the purpose of this is if we need to go assist in other locations and we had to jump in, we would know what to do because we've been trained to different levels. There are 5 different levels of entanglement response. 5 is the highest level you can achieve. And this particular level is only for folks that are dealing with the disentanglement of right whales. Out here on the West Coast, we have levels 1 through 4 that are active. I'm a level 3, which means I can assist with I can put telemetry on the whale, which is a way to track the whale if you don't finish a disentanglement and relocate it another day. And I can assist with a disentanglement effort. We have 1 level 4 in our Northern California area and several level 4s south of us in Southern California and north of us up in Washington. And we're all in constant communication. And I also want to say that the International Whaling Commission uses these same tools and techniques. And the point person for the IWC, David Matilla, he is one of the godfathers of the disentanglement program and disentanglement techniques. And he and others that started at the Center for Coastal Studies have really done the majority of the training of everyone in the network. So there's a lot of national and international cooperation in entanglement response because whales know no boundaries, and a whale we're working on in California can easily cross down to Mexico or to any other nearby country. We go through a lot of training to become higher levels in the network. It takes years to become a level 3 and level 4 responder. We regularly conduct training in small boats, as you can see on the left-hand side, and we'll have a bucket or a fake whale tail towed behind a boat where we practice getting video from, you can see a GoPro at the end of that pole, and holding on to the line off the boat. Drones have also become a really important tool in our toolbox. We may have limited approaches to a whale, and we don't want to burn out our time with the whale by approaching the whale too many times. So putting a drone up in the air and flying it over the whale and really observing what's happening on, under, around the whale is critical, because that photo and video that we get from this part of the process really informs the disentanglement of the whale. The photo on the right is just a screenshot of some of the tools that we use. We have specialized tools. The yellow buoy that you see, this is a telemetry buoy. It was designed to take pressure when a whale dives. And here, this is called a snorkel. A satellite tag fits in here. So if we were to attach this to a whale, we could get a position every time a satellite crosses over the tag. And it also has radio telemetry in it. So while we may have a satellite hit every hour or 4 hours, the radio telemetry will allow us to help locate the whale in the interim. The tools that we use are very sharp, but they're also designed for use around whales. They're curved with the blades on the inside, so we're not doing any additional damage to the whale when we are doing any cutting. We use a lot of grapples for climbers. We use carabiners to attach line to the entanglement. I mentioned we don't ever get in the water and get near the whale, but we do attach additional line and additional flotation to the whales to slow them down and keep them afloat and allow us to approach the whale more safely. Documentation is the absolute most critical part of whale entanglement response. It's almost getting to the point that documentation is as valuable as disentangling a whale. We really want to understand what happened to the whale, what caused it, and the information that we get from documentation allows us to use that science, use that data to inform the prevention and the mitigation efforts. So on the left-hand side, we see a humpback whale. This particular whale was noticed entangled by a whale watching boat. This middle photo is kind of hard to see, but you can see the humpback whale here. Here's the dorsal fin. This is one of the ways that we identify the whale. And you can see these two buoys that are dragging behind it. So you see how far this is behind the whale, but it kept the distance while the whale was swimming. And so the photographer took photos of the buoys, which allowed us to attribute the fishery that this particular entanglement was associated with. And it gave us information, or I say us, but it gave the federal and state agencies information to contact the fishermen. The fishermen are not out to entangle whales, but the information that we can get from them about where their gear was placed, what depth it was, when they noticed it was missing, all of this information helps inform prevention. The photo on the right here is that same whale with, you can see there are multiple strands of line wrapped around the whale's tail, or the peduncle area. It's starting to dig into the skin. This is Monterey, so it looks like a green pea soup. The photo on the bottom middle, this is that same whale. This is 18 days later down in Santa Barbara. We had put a satellite tag on this whale because the conditions changed. It was late in the day and we couldn't complete the disentanglement. And the whale swam offshore and south. And we made one trip to Santa Barbara to attempt a disentanglement, and the whale swam too far away to safely respond in a boat. So we had to wait till the whale came back into a location we could respond to. But this is what the whale's tail looked like 18 days later. And I know this is a little bit graphic, and I should have given you a warning about that, but there is a positive story to this whale. You can see that the weight of the satellite buoy did cause some additional damage to the whale as it swam from Monterey Bay down to Santa Barbara. You can see more of the skin and blubbers exposed. There is a little bit of blood in here, which is a really good sign, which means there is blood flow to the tail and the whale's not going to lose the tail. But what we found with this particular entanglement was right in here, there was a cinch point. So we had got the crab pot off the whale and we tried to unwrap those lines over the tail, but there was a knot in here that required us to cut it. Oops. Let me go back one. Also on the documentation front, there's a lot of information that we need to collect as we are observing the entanglement, observing the whale. And all of this information is science that is used for prevention. So really important that research not only includes the field observations of the populations out in the wild, but also includes the science and the data of when the whales get sick or when the whale gets entangled and what's happening. So these are just a couple examples of our entanglement response data forms that we utilize, whether it is identifying the photos that we need and the images on the camera associated with them, to who was involved and where the whale was entangled and any activity of that particular whale. So there are a lot of roles to fill on an entanglement response, and many people are involved in each response. And if anyone ever sees an entangled whale, you can call 877 SOS whale, and that will start this process of getting trained responders out. And congratulations, you are now all level 1 responders by knowing that phone number. So thank you. This photo on the right is a set of buoys that sadly came off a whale that was deceased up in Point Reyes. This is what the buoys looked like when the whale's tail came off when the gear was cut. And this is what those buoys looked like when this mess of line was straightened out and laid out on the ground. And this gives us some really good information of kind of how the gear was set up. Crab pots often have a pot at the bottom, one vertical line that goes to the surface with a buoy, and sometimes there's a trailer buoy that's connected from here. The fishermen that we work with on the working group have identified best practices for how many buoys to use, how much length of line to use when you're fishing based on depth. So all of that information contribute to the entanglement. And in this case, we were able to reach out to the fisherman and talk to him and understand more about where he was fishing, but also identify some areas for improvements with gear setup. So really important to have the fishermen as partners. And this is what a disentanglement looks like. This photo on the left, this is the whale that I just showed you a couple pictures of the tail wrap. This is down in Santa Barbara, not far offshore. You can see we have carbon fiber poles that we can snap together based on the length we need. We want to be in the notch of the whale's tail. That's the safest for us to be. And this is the first time we used a 2-boat approach. We used the 2 boats to do that unwrapping technique that I referred to kind of help push the boat with the line and get it over the tail. But what you'll observe here is, this person with the pole is Peter. There's the whale breathing. There's the dorsal fin. He's looking for that knot that we saw, and he's going to reach in and made the cut. So that's what it looked like from the surface. It was very simple, kind of pole in the water, one cut. And this video here on the right is shortly after that cut was made. So the cut was just made. We now have 2 lines, and the line is gonna snap off here. And again, the little bit of blood that we see is actually a really good sign, which means the whale is healthy. And here comes the line. The other piece came off shortly thereafter. And oftentimes we don't know what happens after we disentangle a whale because the whale swims away. In this particular case, this whale was spotted 38 days after it was reported, after it was disentangled, 100 yards from where it was first seen in Monterey Bay. So a really exciting success story that the disentangled whale was seen again. And that's a common theme that we'll hear. And I really want to encourage everyone to get out, take pictures of whales and share them to Happy Whale so we can make these connections and see opportunistically where whales may be entangled, or we've even found out when whales have gotten entangled based on sightings from people. So really exciting options there. Oops. So I mentioned this contributes to science and data. This is a report of all and confirmed entanglements between the early 2000s and last year. The green color that's on here is gray whales. The turquoisey blue color is humpback whales, and the darker navy blue are blue whales, and yellow are unidentified. And what you can see is a significant increase in the number of entanglements. I will say that this does not include reports that come in that folks saw an entangled whale if there was no photo or anything to confirm that particular report. So these are entanglements that have come from verified members of the network, or there were photos to confirm that the entanglement was real. I mentioned earlier 2015, 2016, when we had the marine heat wave, and you can see that uptick in entanglements. You see a lot of humpbacks. We're starting to see a lot more humpbacks as we move into this time, and wanting to start question, like, why is this happening? Why the increase in reports? Is it because we have more eyes on the water and more people are aware of what to do if they see an entanglement? Or are there really that many more numbers of entangled whales? So if we take that same data and look at it a different way, this goes up to 2017 only, and look at the source of entanglement. So green is unknown. As you can see, the majority of entanglement reports are unknown. We're not able to identify a fishery that it comes with. If it's just a piece of line, that's not helpful. For the longest time, the dungeness crab fishery was the only gear that was required to mark their gear. So if we were able to get a gear identification, it went with that, which was a type of pot fishery. So the blue on here are pot, the red are nets, the yellow is hook and line, and orange is other. So the net entanglement started to drop off in the late 90s, and there were some gill net changes in the fisheries during that time period. But we're starting to see this blue category that didn't really exist much before, all of a sudden really start to increase in numbers. So if we look at that pot fishery, and as I mentioned, dungeness crab was the only fishery that was required to mark their gear. That has since changed. I'll talk about the prevention efforts and working group efforts, but standardizing all gear marking is really important, so we know which fishery to work with to reduce this issue. But this is what a dungeness crab fishing looks like. You have a pot on the bottom, vertical line up to a buoy, and one or more buoy set in a string. But if we look at the species that are involved in dungeness crab entanglements, we see this purple category of humpback, that it's really hitting this humpback whale population hard. And humpback whales are an endangered and threatened species. Same with blue whale. The gray whale is protected by the Marine Mammal Protection Act, but it is not endangered. And we've had a couple of killer whale entanglements with this fishery. So there was a working group that was formed back in 2015. And I will say that the fishermen were part of that core group that formed this working group with the state of California, who managed the dungeness crab fishery, with NOAA, who manages the Marine Mammal Protection Act and leads the Large Whale Entanglement Response Network, with several nonprofits and recreational fishermen and gear manufacturers. And I was able to represent, or I am able to represent, the Large Whale Entanglement Response Network. But kind of going back to that 2015-16 season when the heat wave came off, we see that that's really when that uptick in humpback whales occurred. And here's an image of that heat map back from the 2013 through 2015, but the formation of the heat wave off of our coast. You can see that the waters are starting to warm up. And in this photo you see here, these are a lot of the members of the Dungeness Crab Fishing Gear Working Group. And at this time, on the whiteboard behind us, you can see some drawings of gear. And this is when we were working with the fishermen to understand best practices and how much length of line should be used based on what depth you were fishing, to really create this best practices guide and get the fishermen and get the fleet involved, so we can hopefully reduce some of those unnecessary entanglements. On the working group front, we piloted a program called the Risk Assessment and Mitigation Program, where we looked back to 2015 and 2016 and looked at the data that we had and used that as a hindcast. And can we predict what went wrong and what really increased that risk and what we would do differently next time? And we found out that we could. And there were 4 factors that we were looking at as part of this RAMP program: the entanglements themselves, how many entanglements were occurring. We were looking at marine life concentrations. Where are the whales? And also the endangered leatherback sea turtle. Where are they at? Are they near the fishing grounds? Are they not? We were looking at ocean and forage conditions. Humpback whales are unique in that they could feed on either krill or small bait fish. When we have strong upwelling years, we have good krill and the whales are offshore, which is further away from where the fishing activity is. If we have those heat waves that are coming in, and this image on the right in the middle, this shows the habitat compression index. And what this looks at is how compressed are those fisheries close to shore. And if you look at 2015, 2016 right here, you can see that they're in the red. So we knew the anchovies were close into shore at that time period. And also in 2018 and 2019, when we saw higher numbers of entanglement. So paying attention to this habitat compression index is an important indicator for reducing the risk. We also looked at the fishing dynamics. So is the fishery opening on time? If it's not, when is it being delayed to? Is it due to market price? Is it due to whales, et cetera? What is the socioeconomic impact of any management actions that are happening? So really evaluating these on a monthly basis. And 2 years ago, the state of California, mostly due to lawsuit pressure, put the risk assessment and mitigation program into regulation. And they included 2 factors that have triggers associated with them: entanglements and marine life concentrations. And I'll walk through what that looks like in a minute. But basically, if a humpback whale gets entangled, it gets a in dungeness crab gear or other gear, unknown gear, it gets a score associated with it. And when a certain score is met, management action needs to happen. And if that score goes above a certain threshold, the season's going to be closed. From a marine life concentrations perspective, the fishing range is divided into zones, and there's different triggers for each zone. So at the start of the season, if more than 5 whales are seen in a zone, then there's some management action that needs to happen. So these 2 things were codified. We have monthly assessments of risk. When any of those triggers are met, it calls an automatic meeting. And then we also want to look at the opening and the closing of the season and identifying any triggers at that point. One project that I'm particularly proud of is the vessel surveys. So as you heard me say, the marine life concentrations factor is critical to understanding any management action in the fishery. The Marine Mammal Center with Cascadia Research Collective as the PI got a grant from the Ocean Protection Council to conduct vessel surveys to inform that marine life concentrations effort. And I really like this photo, so I apologize for the names being at a weird location, but this is our new research vessel, Nova. It has a tuna tower so we can observe whales up high, and there is an inflatable boat and engine on the back of it. In case we encounter an entangled whale, we can conduct an immediate response. But the key personnel on this are John Kalambakidis, who is the lead PI. He is also the lead responder in Washington, Oregon, and California. He is the single most expert on blue whales and humpback whales in the Eastern Pacific. So really proud to be partnering with him, along with other responders that have significant research and entanglement experience. But our objectives for these surveys are on the short term. We really want to inform those ramp regulations. Where are the whales at? What does the timing of the migration look like? Using that relative density that can inform models and decision making. What are the whales feeding on by season? Are they feeding on fish or are they feeding on krill? And long term, the data that we're collecting is going to feed whale abundance trends and stock structure reports that come out from NOAA. And we do that through photo ID and taking samples. This is also improving the reporting and documentation of entanglements. We get a lot of entanglement reports where there's a lot of whale watching activity. So this will give us a chance to look in areas that are underutilized by other vessels. And it also provides a proactive effort to disentangle whales. So this is the survey area that we are conducting our surveys in, zones 1 and 2, which are basically the Sonoma-Mendocino County line north to the Oregon border. That's the northern management area. And then from that point, which is just south of Point Arena, down to Morro Bay is the central management area. And we're doing these surveys at 3 times during the year: in the fall at the start of the fishing season, in the springtime around April at the end of the fishing season, and then in the summer to get that peak whale information. And we're doing these surveys on the 70-meter and 200-meter isobaths. And the reason those 2 depth locations were chosen is that whales will be oftentimes feeding on small bait fish on that 70-meter isobath, and they would be feeding on krill in the deeper waters. And there has been previous research conducted that really lined up sightings with these depths. This is what a survey result looks like. This was from October of 2020. We have down here is Monterey Bay, Half Moon Bay, San Francisco, Point Reyes, and Bodega. And as you can see at this time of year, there were still quite a few whales out. The red dots are humpback whales, the blue dots are blue whales, the yellowish orange are fin whales, and then white are unidentified. And group size really varied from 1 individual whale to 15 large whales. And I'll show you how this information was included in the regulatory process to inform the delay of the crab season due to these high numbers of concentrations of whales. I mentioned we were doing photo ID. You can tell a humpback whale by its tail, the gray whale and blue whale by their lateral dorsal views. But partnering with John and his extensive experience of research in the North Pacific, he has a catalog, and this is 2-year-old data, so I'm sure the numbers have increased by now, but the humpback whales, he's photo ID'd over 5,500 and over 2,000 gray whales and over 2,000 blue whales. So we're just contributing to this photo ID, and all of this information is shared with partners and with Happy Whale as well. I mentioned it informs abundance and trends, so you can see the populations are increasing. It also informs the potential biological removal, which is how many whales can be taken without impact to the population. It's used to inform the distinct population segments and understanding the migrations and the movements of whales better. And we're also looking at photo ID with entanglement ID and survival. We see a lot of whales with scars. We know that roughly 1 in 10 whales, that 1 whale that's reported, there are 10 whales that go unreported. So looking at this scarring pattern is helping us to understand what this problem is really like. And on the scar study front, there is a student of John's that's looking at entangled whales and seeing if entangled whales are really more entangled in areas of where high whale watch activity is, like Monterey Bay or down in LA, or is that just because of the bias of the number of eyes on the water? I mentioned earlier about the 1 in 10 whales being reported, and this is helping us to improve that proportion of entangled whales that are documented. And there is another project that I'm going to have to ask Ellen to put something in the chat, because I apologize that I don't know this offhand right now, but Allison Payne, who is a research associate with the Marine Mammal Center and a student of Ellen's at San Francisco State University, looked at the annual rate of acquisition of entanglement scars on whales here in Northern California and trying to understand what that looks like. So Ellen, I look forward to your chat when I could see it in a minute. But I do want to highlight, I showed you the photos earlier of the humpback whale that was resighted in Moss Landing down here along the bottom. This is from the East Coast, from one of our partners at Center for Coastal Studies. They had a humpback whale that they disentangled on September 1st and had the opportunity to locate it at later dates and be able to view the improvements in the wounds and identify those scars after the entanglement had been removed. So really exciting to learn more about the scar analysis work. And we also put tags on the whales. John and his partner, James Fallbush, are the primary persons responsible for this, but we want to understand, how are the whales using the water column? Are they feeding at the surface? Are they diving down deep to feed? Are they staying at the surface? How long are they staying at the surface? Do we see different behaviors at day or night? When we have a video tag on the whale, are we able to see a whale interact with the gear? So lots of questions that this gives us opportunity to provide answers to. And on the bottom right, you can see this was a tag that was deployed for less than a day on a blue whale off of Half Moon Bay, but you could see its movements on the right-hand side, and above is the dive profile of that particular whale. And so kind of bringing back the vessel surveys and regulation piece, the Department of Fish and Wildlife currently oversees the working group. They have a webpage, Whale Safe Fisheries. I encourage everyone to go check it out. You can see there's a risk assessment tab, all of the data that is collected by different parties to inform all factors of risk is shared whenever a meeting is held. But the department will be monitoring available data. They're conducting monthly risk assessments, and if any of those triggers are met, a working group meeting is called. And during that meeting, the working group looks at the scope of risk and identifies how risky it is for entanglement. They consider all the management options in the toolbox. It could be something as simple as utilize best practices when you're fishing offshore, or it could be something along the lines of not fishing inside or outside of a certain depth, or inside or north or south of a certain geography, or ultimately the close of the season. But there are a wide range of tools in the toolbox to consider. And the working group makes a recommendation to the Director of Fish and Wildlife. The department also makes a recommendation to the Director of Fish and Wildlife. The director makes his decision on what management action is going to happen. There's communication to the fleet, and that management action is implemented, and kind of the process begins all over again with monitoring that available data. So really a direct connection to science and research having immediate management impact. And this is how the survey data that we are collecting is informing any risk in the Dungeness crab fishery. In both the 2021 and 21-22 fishing seasons, the season start was delayed due to the presence of whales numbers in November and in December. And this year, the season was ended early due to an increase in entanglements. One additional conservation benefit that the survey data had is that because it's publicly available on the Department of Fish and Wildlife's website and in the risk assessment meetings, we have partners with the sanctuaries. The sanctuaries were able to see the whale data and see how many whales were offshore. And in the previous year, they extended the vessel speed reduction time period to allow for more time for the whales to move offshore. So really exciting that the survey data not only reduce the risk of whale entanglement, but potentially reduce the risk of vessel strike as well. So what can you do? I'm excited that in another 2 months in June, the Marine Mammal Center is going to be opening. So come up and visit us and talk to us about our work. Go out there and see whales. We really live in an incredible place here in California, and all the data that collected is useful. So go out there, see the whales, share your sightings. And if you do see an entangled whale, please call 877 SOS whale. And with that, thank you very much. I appreciate all of your time, and I look forward to taking your questions. Oops, I can't hear you, Gail. I think you're on mute.
I said, thank you so much, Kathy.
You're
You
welcome.
packed in a lot of great information into that very, condensed and rich presentation. So fabulous information. Thank you. Doing amazing work. And we do have some questions for you. Let's see. First question, Kathy, where is Becca's Marine Mammal Monitoring Station located? Is it in one of the batteries in the headlands, potentially?
It's by Point Bonita.
Bonita, okay. And I don't know what the context was, but there was a question about which person named Peter you were mentioning. Was it Peter Fulkins? I don't remember the context.
Yeah, on the disentanglement that I showed with Santa Barbara, Peter Fulkins was on the boat, and he was the one with the pole in his hand.
Great, thank you. And not a question, but a pitch. In 1986, the Greater Farallones National Marine Sanctuary provided Cascadia Research with the initial 3 years of funding to do the humpback and blue whale research in the Gulf of the Farallones and adjacent waters. Hooray, Greater Farallones, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Another question for you. Is anyone using drone and AI, artificial intelligence, to search for whales in shipping lanes? James Mosquito says he heard this tech was coming out soon, but has not heard or seen anything since 2020. Do you happen to know?
I don't know of anything happening out here on the West Coast. I'm not sure about the East Coast. I feel like there are some pilot programs that seem to move a little quicker out there. So I'm not sure. I don't have enough information on that.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. Oh, and he mentions that he's in contact with one tech company who is looking for funding to continue AI research for whales. Another question. Has the number of pots in the water changed, increased over time, or has it remained relatively constant? Do you know?
I don't know. I know over the last number of years it's been consistent, but I'm sure the numbers have gone up. I know there's tiers of fishing and pot limits based on tiers, but I can't speak to the number going up or down. I'm just not sure.
Thank you. And I was going to ask this question as well. Is there any progress that you know of on the use of ropeless crab pot gear? I recall that was something that was discussed the last time you came and presented to our community. So yeah, any news in that front?
Yeah.
On that front?
Yeah, so the Department of Fish and Wildlife is accepting applications for gear manufacturers to submit for ropeless gear for use when the season is closed. So in the springtime right now, there have been no approved ropeless gear at this time. There are a couple under consideration at this point. I know there are multiple pilot projects going on with the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation is leading a project, and some of the gear manufacturers are working with some of the fishermen on the working group to test the product. There are different types of ropeless solutions. There are some that have an acoustic release. So a boat would go drive over the trap, fire like the acoustic release from an iPad or some other device on their boat. It would fire a squib, then the ropeless is all of the line and buoy are kind of in a bag that sit on top of the crab pot. And when that trigger is reached, the bag opens, line floats up, buoy comes up, and the fishermen can retrieve their gear. There are also ones that have like a timer to it. So there would be a 8-hour set time before it automatically comes up, which reduces the amount of time of vertical lines in the water, because that's what the ropeless solutions are trying to avoid, that the vertical line in the water. And there are some that have zincs that dissolve over a period of time that send the rope up to the surface and test it. So I know that the way the gear is fished, the ropeless solutions slow down the times that fishermen are out there kind of doing their daily kind of haul everything in. They do everything really quickly with their winches and stuff. So there is some willingness by the fishermen to test, and if it works, as it being one option in the toolbox. So that we're having conversations with the fishermen right now, and the fishermen really need to be part of the solution. If they're not part of the solution, it's not going to work. So getting the fishermen to work with the gear manufacturers and determining when the appropriate time is to utilize these tools. I'll say that it's potentially maybe this year or maybe next year there'll be some trials during the close season, but there are efforts being made to test the solution to have it as a tool in the toolbox for the fishermen.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
A couple more related questions. Yeah. Do you happen to know how many buoys or lines are attached to each crab pot typically?
There's one line with one main buoy and typically a trailer buoy. There can be one other small marker buoy at the end of the trailer buoy, but it should be no more than that for best practices.
Okay. And are there any sort of penalties for fishermen if a certain threshold, a certain count of cetaceans become entangled in their gear?
Yeah, there's not a fine, but it definitely hits their bottom line. This year, we had 3 confirmed entanglement reports since March in dungeness crab gear, and the director closed the fishery. So it really hits their bottom line. The fishermen don't want to entangle whales, and we've had a number of fishermen that have self-reported or sent in a report of their own. So we know that it's not intentional, but need to reduce that risk.
That makes a lot of sense. A couple more questions. Why don't you get into the water with the whales?
It is too dangerous. These are wild animals. They are stressed out, and one accidental movement could injure or kill someone. Sadly, on the East Coast, I think it was 3 years ago, there was a level 5 responder, so a very experienced disentangler and commercial fisherman that was disentangling a right whale, and the whale threw its tail and hit him, and he lost his life. And human safety is our #1 priority.
Thank you. That makes absolute sense. It's a dangerous job.
Yeah.
Another question, has the team that responds to entangled whales been affected by COVID in terms of having fewer available hands to assist with disentanglement?
We have been affected by COVID. We have been able to respond throughout the pandemic. We've been wearing masks to keep each other safe on the boat. I think that there has been less eyes on the water during the pandemic and less people utilizing the water. So we've had less reports coming in, but for every response that was actionable, we've been able to send people out. Maybe not as big of a team that we would have had in the past, but enough that could make a successful event happen.
We have also, I want to hop over to the chat. Someone listed a question there. Why isn't the migration of gray whales considered when determining the start of the crab season? Person says that they understand that the opening of the season is often delayed until the humpbacks have passed through, which is fantastic, but then the gray whales migrate through.
Yeah, so unfortunately, the focus has been on humpback whales and blue whales because they're endangered species. And right now, the gray whale is not an endangered species. It does get a secondary benefit by all of the work that's focusing on the endangered species, but they're not highlighted as a species, but they do matter and we do care and do see benefits for them as well.
Thank you. Some more questions about pots and lines and related matters. So do many pots end up being abandoned and left in the water?
No, the fishermen have done a really good job. There is a trap retrieval program that is in place and has been starting earlier than in previous years. And the fishermen are actively getting their gear out of the water. Nobody wants to see their fishery close. So they're doing a really good job on the gear retrieval portion.
That's great. Do large whales ever vocalize during disentanglement efforts?
We have heard some trumpeting and other noises that they make. So on occasion they do.
Okay. Recalling that American President Lines was putting whale spotters on boats to see if a whale is near a boat. And if a whale is near their boat, they can send a message to other vessels where the whale is, GPS, and to basically help other ships watch out for whales. This is more of a comment as opposed to a question, but is that technology readily available and adopted, or is there anything more you can share about that?
I can say, and I should have said this earlier in the presentation, that I would stay tuned for more exciting news coming from the Marine Mammal Center on the vessel strike reduction front. So nothing that I can speak to right now, but I can share that whenever our team sees a whale, they are alerting the Coast Guard so they can alert vessels in the area to keep a lookout, because the whales are going to move around. The whales are going to show up in the shipping lanes. The whales are going to show up in the fishing grounds because they're there for the food. So the best we can do right now is alert everyone.
Great, thank you. Has there been any sort of development on putting a warning noise on cargo ships to scare the whales into another direction? Is there any sort of audio warning?
I don't have any information on that. I'm not sure. I don't know if John Burge on the chat has anything to add on that question, but I don't know anything about that.
Let's see if he wants to share anything. I think those are all of the questions. Let's see. We have a lot of, here's a question. Are you training an international team?
We have interest in supporting international teams. Right now, we're really focusing on building out our capacity here locally, but we do have ambitions to help train others in international areas. And there are dedicated teams from the IWC right now that are doing that training internationally. Fantastic.
I know that in general, the Marine Mammal Center does train a lot of international groups on the various rescue and rehabilitation techniques. So that makes total sense that there will be a movement in that direction with whale disentanglement. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm really excited where I sit right now at the Marine Mammal Center, because we have such an amazing clinical team, and we have expanded to include cetacean field research and really have a lot of areas that we can grow. So it's an exciting place to be right now.
Excellent. John Burge says sound makers were discussed many years ago, but the concern from biologists was that it would interfere with the whale's natural behavior.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. And otherwise, the comments that we have remaining are just, thank you, fantastic presentation, Kathi. Really great information, and it is exciting, as someone said in the comments. It's really wonderful that you and others are working collaboratively to find solutions to prevent these entanglements to begin with, and these ship strikes to begin with. And just kudos to all that you're doing. And there's a question here: what can other boaters do to help?
share your whale sightings. If you do see an entangled whale, stay 100 yards away, but keep your eyes on it until a trained team gets out there. That's the hardest part of entanglement response. And really, I feel like there's some kind of song lyric here somewhere, but it's all about the data. Like, show us your data. I think get out there and enjoy any opportunity that you can while being on the water, and let us know if you're seeing anything.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And what was that phone, that number 1-800?
It's 1-877 SOS whale.
I'm going to put it in the chat.
Yeah.
SOS whale. All right, 187 SOS whale. Got it.
Thanks.
All right, well, thank you so much, Kathi. Thank you everyone who joined. We are so glad to have you here and appreciate your questions and your comments and your feedback. And we hope to see you again next month for our next presentation. Kathi, thanks again. Keep up the great work. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I have a really great team that I work with. So that's part of the biggest pleasure of the work that I do, is the people I get to work with. So I'm here representing everybody else. So thank you to the American Cetacean Society and to everyone that attended today, and to all of my extended team. I appreciate you.
Yes, thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.